Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlot Banter where we review every single Palme d'Or winner. That's right. We are talking about the grand champion from the Cannes Film Festival. And today we have a film from the year 2000. It's starring Björk.
The far-flung future.
Yeah.
Of 2000.
2000, A Space Odyssey. Wait.
That's right.
Lars von Trier, Björk, Dancer in the Dark. That was pretty bad. I think we're off to a bad comedy start. Maybe I should be serious this episode. I don't know. We'll see. This film was described as a tragedy, ended up being fairly tragic. I'm interested to hear your thoughts, but first, we have to, as always, do our little housekeeping. Last time we convened the council to discuss a film, we had Torment, which was quite the interesting... Hetz, the Danish movie about... a dictatorial teacher and the student and their relationship that comes out of that. It got a 6.35 according to our ranking, and we kept the decimals because we were too lazy to debate yet another tie at 6.4. Yeah. It went below Blue is the Warmest Color at spot number 14 on the list. So there you have it. And today we will add yet another film, but first, as our final bit of housekeeping, we might or might not have a featured comment from the previous weeks of Banter videos.
We have a featured comment, but we have to go many weeks in the past to find the video this comes from. Because this comes from a let's call it a Quest adjacent video.
Alrighty,
this comes from, we watched every Best Picture Oscar winner and ranked them.
Oh, the 6.5 hour opus on Backlot Banter.
Featuring...
This is our Sin Tango.
Yeah.
Featuring the one and only Sam Meltzer, right?
That's right.
On that,
featuring the Not You.
But today I want to feature the one and only Spencer Davis.
Oh, Spencer.
788.
Hey, Spencer.
I'll get your numbers right.
Spencer and I go way back.
Yeah, you a big fan?
Yeah.
Spencer says, Shakespeare in Love is a good movie. It is. If you're a fan of Shakespeare's work, the way they bend and twist his themes and structures is actually very clever. Like King's Speech, folks wouldn't have nearly as many issues with it if it hadn't won Best Picture.
I think that last part is absolutely true.
Hey, there's something for everybody to agree with in that comment.
I would say King's Speech I wouldn't have had as many issues with. Maybe not the case for Shakespeare in Love, you know.
I'm just gonna remind everybody about the precedent of buying the Oscars and that it started with that movie.
That's right.
But thank you.
This was detrimental to history.
Dear Spencer.
If you guys want to defend the work of Harvey Weinstein, then you can.
You may.
You're more than welcome to do that, okay?
We welcome diverse perspectives, Abram.
Thank you nonetheless.
Go watch that video, which is like 3.5 years old.
I'm not saying that I support Harvey Weinstein. I'm actually saying the opposite. I denounce Harvey Weinstein, but I do think Shakespeare in Love is better than Saving Private Ryan.
Well,
honestly, those are on a similar level.
I denounce that. I denounce that, and we'll be doing some more denouncing in this episode.
On Backlot Banter, we denounce Abram Björk.
Yeah, that's right.
Get Sam Meltzer back.
All right.
Let's get down to business. Let's talk about this movie. Tanner, would you remind us of the plot of this film? Give a little synopsis for our audience, maybe.
Certainly, Timo.
Certainly.
A little bit, maybe too much of a chipper response to that, given the material of this film. But
yeah, keep things light where things need to be kept light.
That's true.
Yes.
Dancer in the Dark is about a woman named Selma, portrayed by Björk, a famous Icelandic singer, Björk. And this takes place in like the early to mid 60s. We were trying to estimate. Somewhere in there. Anyway. Selma is a immigrant from Europe who works in a nondescript factory, and
she makes bins.
She makes bins of some kind, and is suffering from a degenerative illness that is taking her sight. She is slowly but surely going blind and has had this illness since she was a young girl. Her son, whose name is Gene, also has this illness, so her main goal is to work enough hours at this factory, basically save up money to get him a reconstructive or surgery to prevent his blindness from furthering. Selma is also quite infatuated with Hollywood musicals of the 20th century, and oftentimes will daydream that her life, in fact, is a musical, which goes against some of the later events of the film, which include her landlord stealing her stash of money and then them getting into an altercation where she ends up killing him, even though he was asking to be killed and was maybe borderline suicidal himself, and is then taken into custody, tried, found guilty, put in prison, and then ultimately hanged for killing Bill, this character, her landlord character, who's also a cop in the town.
Yes.
And that's the end of the film. Quite bleak.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And the film ends with the camera panning up the
That's
roof
true.
like an old 1950s musical.
Exactly, which is I think referenced by someone earlier in the
Yes.
film. Is like, they always pan up to the sky.
So what did you guys think of it? Tucker, what are your thoughts and opinions on Dancer in the Dark?
I think this movie's going to be fun to discuss because it allows us an opportunity to talk about challenging the norms of the cinematic form, which I think is a powerful thing and an important thing for the furthering of the art. But I think it also, this film in particular, gives us a place to talk about where conventions, I think, are necessary to keep an audience emotionally engaged, because I respect Lars von Trier for going off the... In some ways,
in some ways, as an artist,
I was finishing my sentence.
I know. I just wanted to interject because I learned some things in researching this film that we should probably address, like we did with like Blue is the Warmest Color.
I respect him for trying to break the cinematic form and attempt to expand what the medium can do. But ultimately, the emotional weight of this film is undercut by its stylings, I think, very heavily. I think the writing can be quite poor. I think the performances can be very, very hit or miss. The plot is as simple as it is convoluted. And by the time you get to the very end, where some genuinely powerful emotional scenes are happening, I am completely tuned out, disconnected from the characters. And I'm like, I wish I cared. I want to care, but you didn't build this up to be a movie that I should take seriously. And so in the last 20 minutes of the film, we're like, damn, this is some serious stuff. I'm like, I can't take it seriously because I don't take these characters seriously.
Sure. Okay. And we don't take you seriously.
Audience members?
Well, he's talking to Lars. Are we implying that
Lars
is in the audience?
Maybe.
I don't take the audience.
Lars is
Time
in
for
the audience.
denouncement 3 of the video.
That's true. What else is he doing? He's certainly not making another movie. He might be making another movie. It just takes him a long time.
Abram.
Yeah, this is a really interesting film. As we were watching, there are certain things we were laughing at because as we were remarking about, a lot of these sort of experimental filmmaking techniques here have been adopted in some part, either directly or tangentially, by like sitcoms, by things like The Office. And I think that sort of inadvertently has caused like splash damage on this movie.
On one movie.
But and that's true, and I can't deny that. But I also can't deny that when I separate that reality, which I think is fairly easy for me to do, because I think Björk's performance is so amazing, I find this movie really, really hard to even think about because I just find it to be so sad. And ultimately, I forget a lot about the movies I watch. I watch a lot of films, and a lot of things leave me. But I don't think the sort of sadness of the end of this film and the sort of desperation across it will leave me. And I think that's a testament to, even if the uniqueness of the filmmaking here has been sort of recontextualized by what we have watched growing up, I don't think it changes the fact that it's not only a very bold film formally, but it's one that, contrary to Tucker, from my viewing, was deeply, deeply, deeply affecting emotionally. And I found it very compelling. I was looking at Letterboxd, and there's a lot of 5-star reviews that say, I hate this movie.
Yeah, it's got a 4.2, but most of the top reviews are like, Lars von Trier, I hate you. This movie sucked. I'll never watch it again.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of like 1.5-star reviews that are also like, Lars von Trier,
I hate you. I'll never watch this again.
So,
this movie sucks.
I think that the sort of like intensity of the emotion of this film is what makes it so captivating, but also makes it for me sort of hard to get into because that emotion just feels like so heavy over my viewing that I just kind of leave this movie feeling quite sad and feeling like it's made a sort of long-standing impact in my brain. And that's that.
Yeah.
It's like a feeling movie to me. And it's a bad feeling.
Almost, yes, for sure. I mean, Lars von Trier, we've dropped his names a couple times in this video so far, but he is certainly the most polarizing working director of our time. Working director. His last movie was 2018, and he's done some TV work after that potentially, but he certainly takes a long time in between his projects because, for all of his faults, he is a perfectionist and has a very distinct style about his films and pores over these scripts and the imagery of his works to make sure that they are perfectly aligned with his vision. And while it was alienating for me for the first 40 minutes of this film, I think you do get used to it. But what really like re-endeared me to what Von Trier is doing here is basically at the 40-minute mark when we get that drop of a hat. Suddenly now it's a musical. Like I had no idea that's what this film was. I don't know if you guys knew that. I don't. I don't know if that was. I don't know if that's common knowledge of this film.
I only knew it from. I think that the description of this film on Google and Letterboxd and things says that she daydreams about her life, like with the beat of the machines or whatever. I'm like, okay, I kind of expected that to happen.
Yeah,
and also you cast Björk and Catherine Deneuve in your movie.
That's
like,
fair.
You're gonna do something with this.
That's fair. That's fair.
And they did.
They did, and I did not foresee that in the slightest.
Yeah.
And so I was very pleasantly surprised and find that largely those musical sequences very much redeem the film for me. Especially, I have a much higher opinion of the film as a whole than I would if they weren't there, or if they were done in an entirely different way, perhaps. I agree with Tucker on a lot. Sorry, I'm going on a long time. I agree with Tucker on a lot of things about maybe the attempted emotional cash-ins that are prevalent throughout this film. I don't feel like they're entirely successful.
Yeah.
But we'll get into all that in due time. So very conflicted on this film. Likewise, very excited to talk about it.
Well, I would probably have to put my thoughts somewhere in between Tanner and Abrams. I enjoyed this film quite a bit. I really liked Björk's character. I thought her performance was really endearing, really dragged me in. I found myself just constantly evaluating like how I know that what choices that she's making are her character's choices. I felt like her character was so true to herself, even in its kind of warped vision of the world, and the way she sees how she should act and how she should treat her son. It all was very interesting to me, and I felt very, I guess it seemed quite natural the way that like her decisions played out in the film, even when I was like, no, don't pick that. Like, it was like, but I was like, okay, but I get it. I totally understand why that's happening. So I enjoyed her character work. The cinematography, this like, I kind of came to a thesis about it at the end of the movie. I was like, you know what? This is like watching a home video, except it's shot. It's like a period piece with
composition.
Yeah.
Well, that's what threw me. That's what was throwing me so much of this being a period piece is I just assumed it was set contemporarily.
Because the camera style is so like indicative of this like 90s home video style is kind of my reading of it. That was where I was assuming the film was coming from, but it wasn't. And so I got used to it. And then I started really liking those transitions to the musical number because those are shot very differently. Like, I think the cinematography holds a lot in this film about like how Von Trier is like trying to communicate his opinions on the world and on these characters. Just to name a little bit, like we see from the backs of people like so many over the shoulders, like constantly. And so I think that like the thematic material that's being laid in with the cinematography is actually pretty interesting. And I think like kind of all the side characters are a little bit forgettable, and the plot is a little, I don't not paint by numbers, but I can kind of see where it's going. Like, oh, the money's in the box, and we see her put away the box, and then I see, oh, Bill notice where the box is. I'm like, I wonder where that money's going. Like, it's pretty obvious, but I think it's effective for telling this very dour story that, like Tanner said, is redeemed, I think, in its tone through the musical sequences, which are inventive. They are like, they're kind of funny, and despite it being a hugely tonal mashup, but because we're so interior in Selma's mind, we are so like the film is so intensely from her perspective that they really, I think, reveal a lot about her character in its opposite. Like they're almost like the complete opposite of what is really happening in the world. And so we learn so much through them by seeing what she wishes were. And often, I mean, the lyrics are kind of like very, I don't want to say hokey, but they're like on the
I think they
nose.
can be, yeah.
They're on
Yeah.
the nose musical lyrics, which I think you could either deride the film for, or you could be like, that's paying homage to the real musical lyrics, which are often times worse. You know.
Well, here's what I'll say of it. I think it's all plays into the very anachronistic stylings of Dancer in the Dark. We mentioned already sort of the what can be a bit confounding, this like 90s 2000s home video look and aesthetic
It's
in
like
the cameras used.
maybe there's a slightly better. It's kind of like yeah, it's like shaky cam, but you're right, Tucker, that there are moments where there are very intentionally composed shots, and there are other moments where I'm like, what the fuck were those 4 cuts? Like, why did we like bing bong boom like cut around? What was that? It's confusing.
It's the anachronistic stylings of the camera work and the cameras used, along with the setting of the film, also with the music in the film. I mean, you have Björk, who was by this point in 2000 pretty well established as like a global indie pop superstar.
Yeah.
And
but wasn't an actress.
Was not an actress.
And would not be an actress.
And would not be an actress, mostly due to her experiences on the set of this film.
Yes.
But at the same time, you know, she's in charge of the composition and lyrics behind all of these songs, and they're Björk songs. They are of the era 2000 Björk songs, and they stand out against what is trying to be, or I guess they fit quite nicely in what is trying to be a modern response to romantic, like these romanticized 1950s, going back to the 1930s actually, from what actually the characters watching the film.
Yeah, bandwagon, I believe.
Exactly. All these classic Hollywood musicals juxtaposed with this very almost like postmodern kind of industrial, very artsy Björk music. And I mean, I think these sequences are quite enrapturing nonetheless. I mean, Björk obviously has one of the most singular voices in all of music, both compositionally and as a performer, and brings that here in Dancer in the Dark. And it's just, it's magnetizing to see her sing and also dance in these things. And I personally didn't mind that it's clearly like desynced, trying to replicate the home video style and maybe also the classic Hollywood style at the same time. It was just all very fascinating to me how all these styles have been mixed together into this film.
Yeah. I find it fascinating. I find it artistically fascinating in that like each of these decisions, I'm like, oh, that's really bold. Like it just it's a movie that pushes its style on you, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think gimmicks can be something that keep cinema or any art form staying fresh and on its toes, and this is one of those in terms of no one makes movies with this kind of visual style of using intentionally lower quality home video cameras. That is the equipment that they used to film these were more commercially available and obviously intentionally lower quality. I think that's very bold and does point to Lars von Trier being a guy that wants to challenge the cinematic norms. And I also like that for a period piece that's then shot with cameras that reflect a different time period, and then a very serious story that is intricate with musicals, and that's like totally at odds historically. I like all those decisions in concept. I think that the problem is that they're all in this one movie. If a movie had a serious period piece story that then broke out into songs, I would like that. If there was a period piece movie that had that used these kind of cameras, I would like that. Or any kind of movie that used these kind of cameras. That a movie that had these kind of characters but didn't have the musical numbers, I would like that. But I think the problem is that so many of these cinematic norms that have been established, I think, succeed in the minds of the general audience because they have been tried and tested, and the opposing ideas have been largely weeded out over time. And of course, Lars von Trier is like, no, screw that, I don't care.
Exactly.
And I respect that again. But as a viewer, I'm watching this, and especially through the lens of someone in 2024, my takeaway from the visual stylings was mostly, this looks like 2006 YouTube video. It looks like a couple of kids shooting in their backyard and swinging the camera back and forth and not focusing on things quite right, and the performances aren't quite landing and they're stumbling over their lines a little bit. It felt comedic to me. And we were referencing The Office and the way that things are shot and framed and the handheld cameras swinging back and forth. And I felt that as well. But the reality of experiencing this film, I think, is at odds with its own thematic material, which I think is there. But then again, I have to go back to the fact that I like Björk's performance a lot. I don't think her character is particularly well written. I don't think her dialogue is particularly good. And she's so sickly sweet of a character and has no flaws and has one goal and doesn't have a lot of character traits. I'm like, I don't want this very obviously sweet person to go to jail and be killed. But narratively, I just found this film so unsatisfying and so hard to get into.
I totally understand where you're coming from.
It's a very frustrating film to me because I want to be the guy who loves films and watches thousands of films and is able to find real artistic personal value in rejecting the form and experimenting. But I'm watching this movie and people are crying. I'm like, I'm just laughing at it.
And suddenly, Tucker, you're wanting to be like, well, don't do that. You want to keep those artists in line.
Yeah. And so I this film kind of in some ways cements to me some of these choices, whether it's shot composition or
the rules exist for a reason.
I think they kind of do. Like I don't like saying that, but that's the reality of me experiencing this film. It's like I'm laughing at the sad parts. That shouldn't happen.
Yeah,
something's at odds here.
or sometimes it does. But I want to turn it over to Timo and Abram. So like for you guys' thoughts there.
Abram, responses?
I have a response. I'm still thinking. I need you to go first, Timo.
Okay.
I have many ideas in my head.
Well,
I'm still loading.
I'm like, I want to now dive into this character because you guys
go ahead.
I want to hear Tucker, and Tanner, your thoughts on this character arc and your reasoning for why you don't think it's super well written.
I don't think there is a character arc.
Well,
she doesn't change.
She doesn't change, but in doing some research on von Trier and his artistic approach sorry.
If we may pivot, because I asked this question and I want to hear what you guys have to say, but I would rather hear about the production history because I actually know nothing, and it might be a good time to fill in myself.
Do you want to get into like the controversy?
Yeah, I think so too. Maybe before we dive a little further into it.
In 2017, during the sort of the social media event, the social justice event that was the Me Too movement, Björk came forward and in all but name said, hey, this director on a movie that I worked on in Sweden around this time sexually assaulted me on set of this film. Here are the specific things that he did. And she made like a numbered list and posted this on Facebook of the things that he did, including like, groping her and like hugging her for way too long after she expressed that she was uncomfortable with that, threatening to like climb over the balconies at the hotel they were staying in to come into a room in the middle of the night, even though his wife was there in attendance during the production of this film. All these various things. Did not name Lars von Trier, but Lars von Trier did put out a statement saying that he did not sexually assault Björk, saying that
guilty
people have accused him of
what?
that. Saying that he's been accused of that, and nobody's going to listen to him, but he's denying it nonetheless. So.
Now, I don't know the story at all, and this is not me defending him, but is there a chance there's someone else? Or like, has she worked on so few films that it's pretty much definitely
basically
him?
The public outcry was, this is definitely Lars von Trier, and she never went out of her way to say, no, it's not Lars von Trier.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But also, from what I know, she basically didn't work on films.
Yeah.
Like, this was like her only film role, and again, from what I know in terms of her acting career, we know explicitly that whatever experience she had making this film was so negative, whether that was the emotionality of the story or the background behind the scenes things that caused her to never want to work on it.
It was also a factor of, after the fact, immediately following the production of this, she was sort of slandered in tabloids and gossip news of the time as like, Björk is difficult to work with. She halted production for days on end of Lars von Trier's new film because she's such a diva and she ran away and she couldn't be found or anything like that.
Maybe he was crawling over her balcony and she needed some time away. Holy moly.
Well, most likely, yes. So there's all of that. Von Trier, when she was initially approached, Von Trier wanted her to do basically to make the music for the film, and then she was hesitant about starring in the film, even though Von Trier insisted that she star in the film because he felt the music was so intrinsic to the mood of the character and the piece as a whole that like the composer, the lyricist needed to be the main character. So that's how he basically convinced Björk to star in the film in the first place. And Björk was also, she was familiar with some of Von Trier's earlier work. She was, sort of tapped into that indie film movement in Europe of the time. So she respected his work as a director, but I can't speak to her feelings on his work anymore. I would imagine not very positive.
Well, it's always been a vibes thing, but I've never gotten good vibes off of Lars von Trier.
Well, there's also the infamous sort of I respect Hitler clip from the Melancholia panel at Cannes like 10 years after this film came out or whatever. So yeah, not a good guy.
That's where those vibes come from.
Yeah.
Yes. We found the source of the bad ones. Well, Abram, did you recollect your thoughts, or shall we?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if I talk about the aesthetics, I think they're important, but they also relate to the character a lot too. I think that the reason that I am compelled by the way this film is shot, the equipment used, the way it's edited, which is a very important part. There's some very jarring editing in the film. I think it works for me because it is so committed to this. To me, the film doesn't feel like a gimmick because at every turn we're committed to this sort of subversion of form. It's not just the camera work. It's not just the fact the camera work's out of focus. It's not just the fact that we have extremely peculiar shots, be it from looking up at Gene's knees on his bicycle to these outrageously like pitched, super far away bird's eye shots. I mean, everything in here is very irregular. The close-ups are so close. The editing will cut to a frame that feels like it's out of sequence. The musical numbers appear out of nowhere. I mean, to me, the fact that all of this works in tandem makes it work a lot better than, for instance, when we were talking about Poor Things. Not that these films are really comparable, but I sort of took issue with the film's fisheye effect because it felt like it was like there was a discontinuity between that and the rest of the filmmaking technique. I think that the fact that this film is so committed to its own aesthetic that at a certain point, if I'm able to divorce the fact that some of the aesthetics are now used for comedic reasons, I think it's a very effective vision and an affecting vision for me because I think all of my thoughts on this film go back to the emotion of the work. And I think that the fact that we are so clearly jarred out of a particular period gives this film a very unique, universal quality that I think is going to make it stick in my mind longer. It's sort of a perennial expression of, I think, a lot of perennial ideas. I think that the fact that Björk's character of Selma has no character arc is intrinsically important. I think that she's an immigrant from Czechoslovakia. I mean, my grandparents are immigrants from Finland, and those aren't the same place, but
Mr. Geography over here.
Oh, I know what countries are other countries. Oh.
When I talk to my grandparents, they have coming to America, they had a very singular reason to come to America. And my grandparents came to America when they were very young. And even decades later now, you talk to them and their feelings on America, their reasons for coming, motivations in their life since then haven't really changed. And so I look at the character of Björk and her motivation and her at the cost of her own life, drive towards this goal of literally, and this is where I think the lack of subtlety in the film comes in again, give a better life to her children is critical. I think that the reason that you need this aesthetic is because it captivates your mind and your eye and elevates what is, to me, a very understandable and, I think to its detriment, simple immigrant narrative. And so, to me, you can't divorce that lack of character arc from Björk's character's position, the narrative, and her background.
I agree with
and
that,
I also think that the aesthetic works to sort of jar you in a way to get you on that emotional level, get you thinking about her journey to America and get you just sort of captivated in this singular approach to filmmaking.
Yeah.
So I think that's why the aesthetic works. That's also why, to me, her lack of a starting in one place, ending in a different place,
learning something or changing in some
Yeah.
way. She is a rock throughout the film, essentially.
Yeah.
Not like derogatorily. Like she is
Not like
she
the
is
Johnson.
she exactly. She is not a Dwayne the Rock Johnson, of course, but she is a steady rock of moral fortitude throughout the film.
Yeah.
I would say for my kind of wrapping up thoughts about the aesthetics of the film, by the end of it, I was almost convincing or deluding myself that the kind of shaky camera and this very, I would call it like low production value style, elevated the realism of the film. And to me, I felt that the like realistic nature of our sets and that the lighting wasn't super complicated, and that a lot of times we get like full I think the reason why it kind of looks like this is like a cheap look, but when you go entirely in focus with an infinite focus plane, when you can, no depth of field, that actually nowadays we're so used to saturating everything with like shallow focus that when you have a really deep focus range, you're like, it's not very cinematic. But those are realistic qualities.
Screw you, Orson Welles.
Yeah, screw you, Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
So by the end of the film, I was like, okay, this is a naturalistic quality, and once I don't think the editing is naturalistic at all,
No,
but I
of
think
course.
the cinematography and the way that we like direct our eye to different moments and to different things throughout the scene and the conversation is in a natural way, and I found myself feeling the realism of the situation towards the end of the movie. But it took me an hour and 30 minutes to get there, I will say.
Right. Yes. Sorry, Tucker, did you have something to
Yeah,
jump in with?
I just want to say I disagree about the realism thing, mostly because the film stock, well, it's not shot on film, but the material that the film is shot on and the way that it is color graded and exposed in the post production, whatever they did to this film, makes it not look like the way you see things in life. The fact that most films are shot, even if this is not particularly bold artistically, in a way that recreates the human eye, even if that is using lighting to backlight someone so they're more clear, but your mind doesn't think about the fact that they're backlighting it. There's so many ways that film production has created a visual styling of the world that to you looks like you're seeing the world, but obviously it's hyper real in some ways. This film is not hiding the fact that it's hyper real, and again, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
But
It's a musical, after all.
Yeah, it is, and it's especially hyper real in those sequences, which I have less of an issue with. But even in the more serious sequences, it can oscillate pretty heavily between the handheld shaky cam thing, which I can understand that being more like you're looking back and forth during a conversation, and it recreates kind of the way the human eye drifts around the world. But also it oscillates between that and really crazy framing and really crazy shots and very blown out lighting where the light bouncing off a car will like fill the entire frame. Like that's not what looking at the world looks like. And so when it's I can't take it as seriously.
I get that, and here this may be another effect of our modern conception of things that look like this filmed on video cassette, whatever. This like early form of digital camera, now having like a much broader sense of what video material shot like this is about, or what the material is. To me, it more replicated or invoked like literal home video, or like we might know it now, but maybe being used, especially with what the film's about, like a true crime sort of narrative or documentary or something. So I don't know if that was von Trier's sort of idea back in 2000 when that wasn't really the case with material like this, when it was like the cutting edge digital technology in cameras. But
for home cameras specifically, not for
film
cameras.
Exactly. That's the point.
Yeah.
And also, since we're on this point still, since we're on the point of the aesthetic and the style and the technology yet, Tucker, you mentioned like '06, like early YouTube videos reminding you. To me, my point of reference is really the only other film of note that I feel looks like this, and that is a film that is, I feel, quite similar to Dancer in the Dark, Borat.
Oh,
Borat.
interesting.
I think of Borat when I think of
sure.
that was in my mind the whole time. I was like,
God,
that's the only other movie that I've seen that looks like this.
Sure.
For
because
me,
it's filmed on very similar technology.
that touchstone is like early period America's Funniest Home Videos, which I would watch.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Like
yes.
it's
100%.
which is such a strange like touch point for the film. Like honestly,
totally.
it is so strange that these are the things that were. But I mean, it really is very similar. So
Yeah,
I don't
and
exactly
I think
know what
worth
to make
noting
of that observation.
Worth noting that a lot of the things that we're mentioning are hedged in the comedic genre.
Yeah.
But I think this is important.
Okay.
Because, and this,
Why is it important? Abram?
It returns to why I feel this piece is largely about the emotion of the narrative and this sort of transcendent immigrant story. Because this look can be comedic. That's our touchstone. But it also is evocative of the tapes my parents have.
It's the home video thing.
And
absolutely.
it's more than just home video. It's looking at old photos of my parents and my grandparents, and the colors are nowhere close to life.
Yeah, of course.
I don't think that the film is naturalistic in that it's like a meta-naturalism, because it's not naturalistic in that I look at this film and it looks like the world that I see right now.
Yeah.
But I look at this film and I see the world that we captured in home video.
Sure.
And home video is uniquely interesting in the way that it too moves memories out of period.
Definitely, yeah.
And into this sort of transcendent state.
Sure.
And so to me, I think that it's sensible to draw these touchstones to comedy and things, but I think it's also inaccurate to say that is primarily what this style evokes.
And I'm not saying that. I'm not saying. I was just pointing out that, like, you know, that's where the hangups are coming in.
Yeah.
But if you really like try to approach it with, you know, trying to leave those things out of mind, try to approach it with the era that it was made in, certainly, then you can leave those things behind. Ultimately, it's just that when you're watching it experiencing it for the first time, those are the things that your mind brings forward. But you're absolutely right about the actual narrative, the emotional narrative of the film can overtake that, and I feel it does. You know, we can talk about the ending of the film.
Yeah,
but,
we ought to
when we get to it. But we can keep forging ahead on whatever point we'd like to keep going on.
Do we want to get back to Selma's character?
Well, I think I need to respond to that real quick, because I draw the touchstones to things like YouTube, but I also draw the touchstones to things like YouTube because a lot of early YouTube videos were just people uploading their home videos, hanging out at the park, just filming your friends in the backyard. Hey, some might say. But the reason why I understand the idea of this, like the emotionality and the more serious emotionality or genuine emotionality that you're talking about, also being something that can be captured and invoked by this kind of cinematic styling or visual styling. The reason I would disagree is because I do feel like this film feels, in its narrative and characters and writing, very hyper-real, very unrealistic. I don't think any of the characters act like actual people. I think the way that the characters interact feel very stagey and very forced in the dialogue sequences. And it's that lack of honesty that I think is very juxtaposed. If I watch some people hanging out at grandma's birthday or in their trailer or whatever, and it's a real thing, there is, I think, the understanding for me that is a memory captured, and I can I take that emotion because it's quote unquote just the camera capturing what happened. But this is a film that I think, in being a full theatrical production, loses a little bit of that honesty to me, because I know it was Lars von Trier writing these characters and placing the camera and making these decisions, and not that necessarily takes away from it, but when it's combined with characters I don't find believable and a storyline I don't find believable and emotionality that I think oscillates so heavily between sad and like weirdly funny, that I don't believe the honesty of that kind of portrayal of this genuine, more serious subject matter, because the subject matter I don't think is serious enough for me to. I watch it as comedic because I feel that the performances and the writing are comedic, not just the fact that it looks like a Smosh video. It's kind of acted like a Smosh video.
I can totally understand where you're coming from with that, Tucker. So let's get to Selma and performance broadly, I think.
Selma and Louise.
So, Selma, we've been talking about her character already. Want to know, just because I did the research, this is part of von Trier's what he refers to as his Golden Heart trilogy, wherein he makes these films that are about people who are pure of heart to a fault in a overtly cruel world, and how that tears them down and they become, destroyed materially because the world emphasizes those things, and these people who are morally good, of golden heart, do not value these things, and so they come to tragic ends because they are at odds with.
Do you remember what the other films are?
Breaking the Waves and The Idiots are both in this trilogy. Which
are all very early films.
Exactly. That's like the first 3 films he made, really.
And also not the films that people know him for. People know him for films of people that are just giant shitbags.
His Depression trilogy, as he calls it.
Great. Yeah.
He's got a set of trilogies, this guy. So
what about the Cornetto? No, that's not. Wait, that's a different guy.
Different guy. So I think Björk is, on the whole, I think she's good. Again, largely because I think she really nails the tone and the cinematic grandeur, as close as you can get to that in this film, of those musical sequences. The character is purposefully written to be very sweet, saccharinely so, and to a fault. Like, that is the point of Selma as a character. And that can be frustrating when you're like, how does a person like this exist in a seemingly otherwise normal, relatively real world? But of course, that you have to hedge that in. None of the other people are acting exactly like naturalistic either. They're all operating in this sort of heightened, dreamlike state where they do weird things and say weird things. I think to like Peter Stormare, for example, or Bill, who's like gives Selma a ride home and like stops and says like, I'm gonna shoot myself, I think. Like it's melodramatic is the word that I kept coming back to. And ultimately with that genre, people can either like that or dislike that based on how they feel about emotional manipulation in film. And that's something that I've been wrangling with, as well, as it's been like levied as criticism against certain films or not. Because I feel like, isn't all film is manipulative to a certain extent. It's really just if you feel the manipulation or not, and to what extent you consider that a fault of the filmmaker or the writer or whatever, or the performers. So I don't know. That's kind of like my thoughts that are non-thoughts on the performances of this film. Is just really the introspection that I've been doing associated with this film.
Bjork's I don't really feel like she had any missteps for me in her performance. Now, the other characters in the film, I think definitely do. Like the theater classes, I think are pretty, pretty poor. And I think it doesn't necessarily start us off on the greatest foot. I think like our first couple scenes, like in the film, in which we are just, dropped right into it, and we got to figure everything out, don't actually have our greatest performance. But we do have a really nice scene, I believe, between Bill and Selma when he comes to and they share their secrets with each other. I think that scene, is
one of the best scenes in the movie.
The best scene in the movie. And that's where I'm going to choose to highlight the performances, because I think that acting is really hard. So I'd rather be positive about it than negative. But I didn't love some of the other ones. The supporting cast is certainly not as good.
I do want to focus on Björk, because as someone who's not an actress and as someone who whose performance is intended to fit the stylings of this film, I think she knocks it out of the park. I think that the way that she delves into this character and sells the unique vocal tone that the Björk the person has, but the character certainly has, and she leans into that, and the way that she has her quirks and that she has sort of a soft smile on her face in all sorts of scenarios, is a very committed, full-on performance, and I think she nailed it. My problem just becomes, I don't like the way that the character is written, and I also don't like that. I don't like that the character is this way. She has these sweet smiles in situations where maybe she shouldn't, and she kind of like dreamily, lazily like floats through sequences and doesn't quite respond to things. And Björk is nailing that. She was given this direction and she is killing it.
I mean,
But that's not a compelling character to me.
That's fine.
And
she has no sense of the. I know this is the point. That's what like I have to. That's what
the point can be bad.
Yeah, that's fair. You know that the point is though that she has no sense of self-preservation.
Yeah,
Like she's just not that kind of person or character or whatever you want to use. But like that is inherent to the story that is trying to be told. Is that like the world is cruel. So here's a person who is in every way the opposite of cruel.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I understood that so easily with her character. And that's why I was left actually satisfied by the plot that her character goes through, because I am so understanding of like why. I feel like this movie, despite not answering a lot of questions, answers why quite a lot. Like, why does she not tell anybody? Well, she's very ashamed about her eyesight. Why, does she save up the money? And it's because she's got, like Abram was saying, this immigrant story of extreme selflessness. And I don't exactly know how it's communicated, but to me, I was like, I just got it. I just understood. And then all the choices throughout the rest of the film and the ways that she were acting were, I was like, well, that's because that's how she is. This is how this character is. And I guess I wasn't reading it as like a fault of the film, but that the character itself is very kind of nuanced and not able to really see the entire picture. I don't know if that's like a weird blindness thing, but like I really felt that was
God damn it,
communicated like very specifically. Yeah.
Okay, Abram, you're bursting at the seams. Go ahead.
I'm game relating. I've got a couple things to say.
Go for it. Absolutely.
That are kind of all stuck together in my head.
Okay. We'll let Abram go. We're not gonna. No interruptions. No interruptions.
Okay, so Björk's character Selma is an immigrant, and she is here, as I've said before, what rings true of my life, singularly focused on having a better life for Jean. And she believes in this idea of the American dream. And she believes here in America, she and her son can be novi. They can be this new person. Yeah. They can have this new life. She works extremely hard. She's extremely nice to everybody. She, despite her disability, which she hides, and I think that sense of shame is intrinsic to this narrative as well.
Yeah.
All of that is true. She's working so hard. She's being so nice. She's doing this for her son. But what happens? This immigrant who comes to America is constantly sort of taunted for being from Czechoslovakia. And these sort of aspersions of her being a communist are levied against her at several points, not only by her boss in the factory, but then much more overtly again in the courtroom.
Courtroom drama.
She has her money that she earns taken from her by a policeman. She is
also a landlord.
And a landlord.
Oh, shit.
She is an immigrant victim who is a victim to this American system. And I think that the saccharine nature of her character, why is that happening? I think it's because it's trying to comment on what system is oppressing her and ultimately kills her.
Yeah.
And what it took for her to get Jean that treatment for his eyesight and who took it from her. I think that's all critical. And I think that's all the information that you need to contextualize her overly sweet demeanor. Whether or not you find that effective as an audience member is going to differ. But I think that this film is extremely effective when you view it through these lenses.
Sure.
Through this thematic lens, through this cultural lens, through this immigrant lens. I think that if Bill was just a guy, the narrative doesn't work as much.
Totally.
But it's about social class and position and role and what all of that means.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. And I think that you are making the best case of anything we've said tonight of what the intention of this film is.
Yeah.
With the choices of the American system, of her being an immigrant, of her disability, of her personality, all these things do focus down to that. And I absolutely agree. I think that's the intention of this movie. And it is, I think, a great intention of telling this narrative and in the way that fits into the time period, and then Lars von Trier as a person from another country making a narrative about this. I think it all makes sense. I think that the problem for me then becomes, because of the thematic narrative is there, the like basic narrative is there that I think absolutely I could be 100% in and on board with that narrative being told. But it is a film that, again, I think is at odds with itself. Its themes are there, its narrative is there, its emotion is there in concept, but watching a character that I can't get I was about to say I can't get a grasp on. Now that would have been a social faux pas. That would have been the exact opposite of what I meant to say, because I think the problem with this film for me is something that we've levied against quite a few films is it's an I get it kind of movie. I'm watching the first 20 minutes of this film. She's dealing with blindness. She's got to save up money. She's very poor. People aren't treating her right. I get it. She's very sweet. I get it. Other people are not sweet to her. I get it. And then that is all the movie does for the next 2 hours and 20 minutes. Yeah. And I don't feel, other than the bare level plot point changes of she has to, that we learn about the fact that she has to save the money for Jean. Okay, that's an important plot point. That she ends up in the struggle with, and then dealing with Bill and killing Bill. Okay, that's a plot point.
She's doing what? She's killing Bill?
Hold on a second.
Oh shit! Oh, that's a movie reference. Kill Bill joke. Oh Christ. All those plot level things I understand, but I don't think almost anything in the middle of those sequences adds enough for me to feel like this movie is worth its runtime, is worth focusing on a character that doesn't change or changes so little. It's a long movie, and I don't feel like I get more out of her as the movie goes on, because her personality is so clear and so unchanging that putting her in the other sequences, I don't get more out of her as a character. And I think back to some other movies where there are like hyper real characters, and you brought up Poor Things, and so it's on my mind. And Bella Baxter is a character that is incredibly hyper real, and she's obviously narratively a character that is unreal and personality wise unreal, and then delivery and performance, all this is so exaggerated. But that character changes her mind and is challenged and grows and develops, and these things that I think are so core to connecting me to the emotional moments of a character and wanting to see them, knowing where they're headed and knowing that's not the right direction, but then seeing them change their mind and being pulled back to it. These are the things that make a character's narrative compelling to me. And I think so many films do that well. And I think where Dancer in the Dark fails is that we have a unchanging rock character in the middle, and she's in the middle of a stream, and I'm just watching the stream go by her.
Well, I think that I think it's more
she is tested though.
The fact that
yes,
I think it's more the fact that she's pushed along by the stream. Is that
very Oliver-esque?
Yeah, that's right. She is. And I want to thank Abram for bringing this talking point into this discussion, because I think it's quite cogent. And also, you're talking about the power structures that are sort of imposing cruelly on Selma, whether that be her Bill, this character who she kills and torments her before she kills him, is both a policeman and a landlord. Sort of, he's sort of pulling double duty there. But the labor system at the same time, and the justice system, and more broadly, I think nearly every Lars von Trier film has a female protagonist, and so he's obviously very interested in these ideas of the patriarchy as well, following these female characters, and that is also in this film. And unlike Poor Things, that is really about like the resolve of the human person, and how even in its infancy it can grow and blossom and branch out into something that is stronger than the world and the cruelty of the patriarchy and the world around Bella Baxter. Whereas Von Trier is taking the opposite, the nihilistic position, where it is the world will...
Lars von Trier, nihilistic?
If you can believe it. I know it's far-fetched, but he is like, the world will take something so innocent, something so beautiful, this woman who only has one goal, which is to make a better life for her son. She is going blind and, working all these hours. She is letting go of her dreams and her love of musicals to simply make a better life for her son. They will kill her in the most cruel and blatant way possible. That's what the world does to like kindness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the fact that her character, Selma's character, isn't tested, like she is tested, and she stays the course. They take the money ostensibly out of the medical account and are going to give it to the lawyer, and she like flips out, and at that moment is when I think this is a very important piece of her character, when she is given the opportunity to not to get out of jail. Basically, I think the way the film presents is like, if she goes with the lawyer, if she goes down that route, she will be freed, or at least, you know, not killed. But the way that her character is and her mind is set up to save her son, to make her son's eyes better and to give him a better life, is that she then has to keep the money there and shun the lawyer. And so I think that that is an important character choice. That is a very important thing that you, I mean, you really can't argue that there's not an arc when that's kind of like the final choice that everyone is throughout the film. I don't think very hard pushing her on this idea until the end of the film, when they're like save yourself or save your kid. And I think everyone questions why, you know, throughout the film, why can't we give him the bicycle? You've never bought him a birthday gift in your life. And it's like, at the end of the film, it's because it's all going to this one thing.
Yeah.
And
there's one gift.
Yeah.
And I like that. Yeah.
I think that there's another dimension, though. I think that we're talking about her as being solely sweet, but Timo, I'm really glad you raised that, because we have to remember that one of the first actions in the film is she hits her son. It's one of the first things she does. He's hanging out with the automobile gang.
That's true.
He's cutting
those
class.
damn kids and those damn automobile gangs.
So she takes his glasses off and she smacks him across the face. And then we learn at many times throughout the narrative that she doesn't give Gene anything. That he feels bad about this. There's a line where he talks about, I'm one of the last kids in my grade without a bicycle. I think it would be a mistake to assume that she's unchallenged in the narrative, because a lot of these challenges exist in the background of her life, in the context of her life. She's literally fired from her job. She's literally forced to kill a man. She's literally arrested. She's literally hanged. But she also has to assemble this life. She's hand-pricking 10,000 pins on what is at seemingly a weekly basis to make money. She has no money for herself. She has no money for her son. She's living in a trailer. I think that there is more to her character. And I also think that she's very hard-headed. And that is a trait that I think cuts against her sweetness in some ways.
Yeah, sure.
She is so adamantly in search of this life for her son that she'll die for it. She'll reject Kathy saying, your son needs a mother. She'll reject that. She has shame about her blindness. She'd rather give up on her dream of musicals under a false pretense.
Yeah, under a false pretense is the most important thing there. She's not honest about it. She's like, well, I was just pretending to like musicals. She would rather have people have a lower opinion of her personally than to like feel sorry for her.
There's an indignity in her blindness that she carries with her. And that's why I think that the sweetness is even more important, because it's built on top of this framework of hard-headedness and a sort of imperiled life in America.
It's a very like idealized version, and you know, I can't necessarily speaking to having direct immigrant parents or grandparents or anything like that, but it's this idea of the hardworking immigrant person who they don't want help. They will do it their way because they came to America. They're gonna they believe in this American dream of pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, not getting help from anybody, doing it themselves, not wanting anyone to feel sorry for them or get charity from anybody.
And I think that that's what the film is saying. Ultimately, it's critiquing that idea in that narrative. And I think that's the reason why the aesthetics, to bring it back to that quickly, are so important. Why the musical numbers are so important. Because at a certain level, if I'm thinking about me as an audience member, that immigrant story, to your point, Tucker, that we get it, right? That is true, I think. I mean, I think that there's a pretty rock-solid thematic narrative and character arc and everything in there. But I think that when you throw in the musical numbers that are so jarring in how we enter them, and the filmmaking techniques are so bizarre by our sort of rules, entrenched minds, it maybe it's I get the story, but I've not seen the story like this. And so to me, I think that that's a really powerful combination.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I would just have to like basically agree on all counts there. And I want to talk about the end of the film,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of circle back around to, or sort of get all of our feelings on it. I think ultimately,
Yeah.
and get back around to my point of like the emotional manipulation and the melodrama of this, because it happens subtly. It happens subtly to me, at least. That like slowly but surely, I think I became used to the filmmaking style. I got a bit more ingratiated into it. I think you do get much more emotionally involved with Selma when she is essentially in solitary confinement for the last 40 minutes of this film. And it comes along with that scene of her like being by far the most angered and expressive when she must reject the lawyer and like basically turn away Kathy from giving her this money to ensure that she doesn't get the death penalty. All of that happens in the lead up to this moment, and you're sort of anticipating, or at least I was, this final musical number as something that they built up, or sort of established in the beginning of the film. Was like Selma does not like the final number of any musical because she likes to imagine the film going on forever. In reality, that cannot happen. So you're anticipating or perhaps dreading the final number of this film, and that dread becomes very well utilized by Lars von Trier ultimately in a dreadful, harrowing last like 10 minutes where she is strapped to this board to be first of all she's being hanged, which is horrific,
Mm-hmm.
and she's strapped to this board and they have to like she's screaming her head off about not wanting to wear this hood because she can't see, she can't breathe. So there are characters that we know that are sitting down on the gallows having to witness this, and the end of the film, the dropping of and this final song that Björk sings is heart wrenching, and the final moment of it, as it's cut short, and the sound of the like the floor coming out from under her, your heart drops. My heart dropped at that very moment, and so I was just thinking like this film got to me in the end, but like is that impressive, or is Lars von Trier showing me perhaps the most dreadful, harrowing, shocking shit I've ever seen on screen?
Yeah.
And is that worth something, though, is the question I have to ask myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it got to me too, but I immediately at the end of this film, I was feeling the emotion, but I really had to compare it to I, Daniel Blake, because that is a film that has got a similar level of like hitting you in the balls right at the end with how sad it
The
is.
death of the main character.
Yeah. And yet I, Daniel Blake it just hit me like 10, 20 times more powerfully. I
Daniel Blake is so sudden, and this is like she has the noose around her neck for like 10 minutes.
And so I'm Björk's performance is very, very affecting there. It's, I mean, really singing her heart out. And so, yeah, it kind of got to me, but it also, I think was, I don't know, was it deadened by the musical or not? I think the musical, I was like, I wish I saw the ending coming, is how I'm gonna say it. Like when the ending happened, I was like, oh yeah, of course that's how it's end. They set this up like, and then
you wish you could like brace yourself for it a little bit.
It was
I don't know,
because it's obvious that's how it ends. They talk about it in the middle of the movie, and yet it actually did take me by surprise.
Yeah, I experientially land on the opposite side of that, where to me it was still an I get it sort of thing, and now I say that for the other parts, and I say it more condemnatorily for the majority of the film. I don't find that as big of a complaint with the last section of this film. I think that is where the film is at its most focused. I think that's where where Selma's challenged, and especially the decision she has to make, and the performance, I think, are all at their best. I think it's also where the side characters are suddenly a lot more realistic and grounded. The prison warden and the lawyer and these people around her they're not as like wackos as they were before, and so I feel the reality of the situation a lot stronger than I did. But to come back to what I said at the very beginning, while I like this ending, it's too little, too late for me. I'm not. It's like I'm when she goes to jail, and I specifically say when she goes to jail, not when she goes on trial, because I think when she's on trial, that is, I think, the most ridiculous sequence in the film. Not only because it's a musical number, and I want to get to my thoughts on those in a second, but because Nothing about this trial goes the way a trial should. No character in there acts like an actual person. We never see what her lawyer does.
She seemingly has no defense lawyer.
And she's just sitting there just totally in a daze and not reacting to anything. I'm like, I don't believe this scene in the slightest. There's nothing emotional about this at all. But when she goes to the jail and that whole sequence there, I do think I suddenly am snapped a little bit back into the stakes and the reality of this film. But I feel like I'm having to start from ground zero. Because to that point, especially because of that courtroom scene, I'm just laughing at the movie. I'm like, I don't believe these characters, the writing and the performances and the shot composition and the lighting. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't believe this. It's not emotionally affecting to me. And so then by the time the movie is doing something, I'm like, oh, hold on. This is pretty serious. I am kind of engaged. I feel like I only get like halfway there. And then the film ends and I like the abrupt ending. But unlike you, Timo, I did see it coming. And that it's a very obvious ending. But that made it to be like, yeah, this is coming. Oh, it happened. And then the movie ends. I'm like, yep, it happened.
Well, yeah, like Timo said, we were told like halfway through the film that she is to be hung by the neck until dead.
Yeah.
But it's the function of it and how it is really displayed that everyone talks about the fucked up ending of Dancer in the Dark. But I think ultimately it's just like, Jesus Christ, I did. The last note on my
Jesus
page.
Christ.
The last note on my page is just Jesus Christ.
Jeez.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess I just couldn't You wish you could brace yourself to it for it. It is kind of what I said earlier.
But again, I did brace myself. Like I was braced the entire movie. I'm like, that's gonna happen. Oh, it happened. And so it's like just no.
Well, not just the event though. Like the way that Lars von Trier portrays it in such a like a heart dropping way. But
I guess I expected that too, and maybe that's because I understand him more as know what to expect from him as a filmmaker.
You have seen more films of his.
Yeah, one more. I've seen
you've seen Antichrist.
Yeah, and that's a much more serious film.
Yeah.
But to the point of this ending on a musical number, I think narratively, I think creatively, I think that's all great decisions. But film and art is an intersection between the artist, and the viewer. And it has been long said on this show that musicals and musical numbers and the unreality of those kind of sequences do not appeal to me. It takes a lot for me to become emotionally invested in the characters as they're breaking into something that is totally unlike reality. And again, I respect the artistry of that. And especially in this film where that's not expected and it's at odds with the subject matter. I respect that so much. But I laugh at musical sequences because I find them funny. And so when you put a very serious scene and then you break into musical sequence, I start laughing at the musical sequence because musical sequences are funny and these people are doing silly things and they are swinging each other around. And so I am not in the emotional place to be significantly emotionally impacted by a very sad ending because I was just laughing at a sequence in which, she's on the gallows, but people are like snapping in their seats and like looking back and forth. I'm like, that's silly. That's funny.
That's the point of the musical sequences. The entire point of all the music.
But it ruins the emotional ending for me.
Because how else can Björk's character deal or cope with this?
No. I understand it narratively. I understand it artistically.
Yeah.
As a viewer, I am laughing at the sequence in which someone is on the gallows and dies. That is you can't miss the mark farther for me.
Here's what I would say as a viewer.
Okay, here we go.
The musical sequences are literally her daydreaming. That's what we hear. The daydream is her in some ways daydreaming about this idealized American life where she's surrounded by music and she's living her fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
She is killed trying to live her fantasy.
Yeah.
She is killed mid-note. She's hung by the neck in a sequence that I couldn't, as a viewer, I couldn't possibly find that comedic. I'm not talking about the number of the 107 steps.
I think we're talking about the final thing of her singing with the noose around her neck, where no one else is doing anything. They're just looking at
it. And you know why? It's not shot like the other musical sequences.
No.
It is shot like it is like the quote unquote real life. And the way that the film sets up the musical sequences coming out of a moment of intense pain. That's kind of how they seem to me, as they come out just when she really can't deal with too much else. And in this moment, I mean, it's over the top. She can't deal with what is happening. And so she sings and lets it out. But I think, the film doesn't go inside her own head for once. And we just see the rawness of this moment. And that's why it's so affecting.
If anything, here's what I think about it. There's a lot of intrinsic tension built up in that scene. She can't wear the noose, so we're making a phone call. We're making a phone call to figure out if she can be hanged without the hood on. Kathy runs in, which she's not supposed to do, to hand her a pair of glasses. She's forced out of the way. I think that the Beverly, or whatever the name of the woman is who's been assisting her.
Yeah, the prison guard.
The prison guard. She's sobbing. Björk is strapped to a board with a noose around her neck. There are a lot of moving pieces.
There's
here.
a lot of heightened drama in this. This is irregular,
but very melodramatic.
Of course,
and that's not emotional to me. Melodrama is not emotional.
Well, yeah, but here's what to me, I view the musical numbers as, again, her us getting inside how she internalizes the American dream.
Yeah.
But we come to realize that the American dream is not reality, because we see the outside of her. We see her sing, but nobody's dancing. People are crying. They're trying to figure out bureaucratically if they can kill her like this.
Yeah.
That's the context. And she's singing, but there's no pomp. There's no circumstance. There is her systematic execution. And I think that is very rich thematically, as it is dramatically, just by merit of the number of pieces at play. And I personally found it to be actually one of the scariest things I've ever seen in a film.
Yeah, I mean,
and the sound design of her neck snapping is just outrageous. God. I think that there are so many pieces working together in that scene to recontextualize the musical numbers as they occurred, because as we know, musical numbers before happen at a dime, and they happen by recontextualizing the sound and by involving all the people around her. The world doesn't freeze for Selma.
Yeah,
everybody joins in with her, but at the end, nobody joins in, and I think that's very key.
Yeah. I feel as we're wrapping up here, I feel as though it's worth noting that again, I have to refer back to like one of the very first things I said in my opening statement, is that Lars von Trier is easily one of the most, if not the most, polarizing filmmakers working in, not Hollywood, but working in film as a whole.
Yeah.
And I think that's very evidenced by this, and I want to make it clear that no one's arguing, amongst each other here. It's just the fact that like this is a very divisive film, and so people will have different approaches to it, different responses to it. I make no assuasions about the fact that yes, it is 100% melodramatic, and sometimes that works, and sometimes that doesn't. Referring back to my whole point of like people pointing out or saying that manipulative films are flawed by nature of them trying to manipulate you, and maybe it's just the manipulation showing through more in films that are outwardly melodramatic. I'm not sure. I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't say the words Dogma 95 in this review.
Sure. We did our research. We know the film history.
This film technically isn't Dogma 95 because it rejects
too many
quite a
freaking
few
lights in this movie for that.
Too many lights. We're doing musical sequences. My God, blech, disgusting. Dogma 95
Oh my God,
says.
the dialogue is like clean and intelligible, and kind of sounds like they did ADR for about 90% of it.
Also, it's funny actually that Tucker, you're talking about these like the unwritten cinematic rules, because Dogma 95, for all of its like fuck the rules of cinema, was a very dogmatic. That was very dogmatic, and it's like, here are the things that make a film fit in our genre, and go make one. And people were like, I'll make one.
Like five people.
Five people.
And it'll be such a terrible experience.
Was like, Lars von Trier was like, I'll make one, and then I'll keep some of the ideas from this school of thought, but I do want to make a period piece, and expressing violence in my film is important to the narrative, so I'm going to put violence in my film, and all this different stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I just wanted to throw that out there, that like this is in some ways a Dogma 95 film, but because it rejects some of the rules or breaks some of the rules, it
literally is.
By definition is not. So there you have it.
Give it a score.
Let's film history.
Tanner, do you have the palm details for us?
Oh, you'll just have to give me a moment here, Timo, if we just want to vamp for just a second.
Well,
do you want to type in your number here?
Yeah, well.
Order of operations here. I don't know what I'm going to give this film. I think there we go. I'm going to give that.
Have you used a keyboard before?
Yeah.
And now, once...
You got to go watch an Indian action movie.
Yes,
that's right, you do.
Ooh, exciting. I'm going to go play Minecraft. Boom. The scores are in. We've got a number. It hit us from out of nowhere in surprise. Yeah. It's 6.9. Pretty big swing on the old point breakdown. Starting at the bottom, Tucker gave it a 3.7, followed by I gave it a 7.0. That's a big jump if you're doing the math. Tanner gave it a 7.8, and then Abram gave it a 9.0. So 6.9 is going to give us a lovely tie. We're going to have to debate this film versus A Man and a Woman, Claude Lelouch's film from France. This place is vying for number 11, spot number 11.
Can I make this easy?
Yeah.
I want to put this above Man and the Woman, and all of you guys gave this a higher score than A Man and a Woman.
Oh, okay. So I think that is easy.
Yeah,
actually,
there's no debate. I think we all agree on it. And the reason is, I think this is way more interesting of a film than A Man and a Woman.
Undeniable. That's something that we can all agree on.
What do you remember about A Man and a Woman? We watched like 2 months ago. I don't know anything about that movie.
All I remember is that freaking song. It keeps showing up on my Instagram. Yeah. Why do I keep hearing that song while I'm watching Reels? I don't like. I like it. It's a good song. It's just like it makes no sense.
Yeah, makes no damn sense. All right. The poem details. No, actually, Timo, what number does this go at?
This is going at spot number 11 on the list. Okay. Pretty good.
Well, there you have it, folks.
There you have it. We have
details,
20
very
films
quickly
on the list, in case you were wondering.
Yes. 80 left. So, this film premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in the year 2000. Directed by Lars von Trier, bad guy. Jury president that year, also a really bad guy, Luc Besson. Fuck both those guys. Also on the jury that year that selected this film and gave her the top prize were Jonathan Demme of Silence of the Lambs fame, Jeremy Irons, UK actor Jeremy Irons.
Jeremy Irons fame?
Of Jeremy Irons fame, of BVS fame.
Of fame.
And Kristen Scott Thomas, another British actress. Amongst the 23 films in competition, other contenders were Liv Ullmann's Faithless, Oh Brother Where Art Thou from the Coen Brothers, and Edward Yang's Yi Yi.
Oh!
Letterboxd loves that movie.
Letterboxd loves that movie.
All right, we did it.
There it is.
There we have
details.
Let's wheel.
Let's wheel.
Wheel and deal, boys.
Let's wheel and deal. Wheel, what's your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital or is it on reel? Wheel, what's your deal? Or is it on video cassette?
Is it on DV home tape? The number is 24.
24.
The number is 24, and that will give us the film from 1960, directed by Federico Fellini and starring Marcello Mastroianni.
Oh, I just had some nice Mastroianni at Olive Garden last night.
And Anita Ekberg and Anouk Aimee.
Oh, I've heard.
This is La Dolce Vita.
Oh, Dolce Vita.
Sweetness of life, they might say.
I want to watch this movie. I've not seen it.
I've also wanted to watch this one for a while.
I'm always down to watch a Fellini movie, so this is going to be pretty fun.
Yes. I have seen 2 Fellini movies. One of them was one of my least favorite movies I've ever seen. One of my favorite movies I've ever seen.
8.5, and
this one's about a restless guy drifting through life in Rome. Isn't that like what happened?
A journalist. Let's go, baby.
Oh, journalism movie.
Yippee.
Okay, I'm looking forward to watching this one. Join me next week for talking about, La Dolce Vita, Fellini. Thank you guys for talking Lars von Trier, getting into the aesthetics. We said that word many times on this review.
Right.
I thought we came to a pretty good understanding of this film. I'm going to say our criticism covers many bounds and hits a lot of good points. So good.
I think we had a great discussion. I also want to point out that my score rose from maybe a low 6 to a high 7 over the course of this discussion.
Yeah, so. I'm going to give Abram credit for that because I think he raised some very good points about this film.
I think so too.
Well, there we have it. Stick around, Backlot Banter, for more movie review coverage as we talk about the summer box office as well as more Palm winners. It's the regular rigmarole. Okay, enough vamping.
This isn't to be jolly.
Stay warm, keep cool.
Everyone keep cool, peace. Hi, I said it first.
He said it first.